Hey everybody, this is Larry the Cable Guy. Check this out. So I'm in my truck driving with my buddy, and we was heading up to the men's warehouse to fart in the suits, and he's listening to his phone, and I said, that sounds like Hermie Sadler. He said, it is Hermie Sadler. He's got a podcast called Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator. I said, Sadler and the Senator? He said, yeah, that's his good buddy, Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley. I said, well, what in the world? He didn't know this. I said, did you know that Hermie Sadler was voted one of the 50 best looking drivers in NASCAR? He said, I did not know that. I said, because it ain't true. You never know, though. He never takes off his helmet. But I know one thing, this show Leaning Right, Turning Left is good. So pull up a chair right there by your phone, get yourself a cold beer, and give a listen right here to this week's episode of Leaning Right, Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator. I'll tell you what, I bet Michael Waltrip's even listening. He's always wanted to do something like that. Oh, Sadler, got another one over on Waltrip. Get her done.
What? Well, I'm Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley, and I'm a really right-wing conservative all the way through from Southside Virginia.
And I'm Hermie Sadler, and what did we just hear?
It boggles the mind because everything I've been reading in the mail says a proven conservative, not moderate conservative from Virginia. That is actually a recording from a couple years back of your opponent. Dug it up, found it, and now it's our great intro after Larry the Cable Guy. How you doing, Herm?
I'm doing
Did you introduce yourself? Did you introduce yourself?
I'm Hermie Sadler, and I'm turning left, but I'm not leaning left.
And I'm Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley.
And I'm not moderate.
I'm leaning right, way far right than where your opponent is right now. Hermie, and it looks like, we're sitting here in one of the most beautiful sites in all the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're at the top of the grandstands here at Richmond International Raceway, looking down upon these beautiful modifieds running in the Whelen modified race here in Richmond on Friday night. It's a little overcast, but we're hoping, since we've got two cars in there, that we're going to do pretty well today.
How about the weekend that we've got shaping up? Tonight's race at Richmond, you and I, Senator, have Ryan Newman and Bobby Labonte driving our two open wheel modifieds tonight at Richmond, and tomorrow night over to the famed South Boston Speedway for the Smart Modified Tour race at South Boston tomorrow night. What a great weekend. What a big time racing weekend for the Commonwealth of Virginia, but a big weekend for Sadler Stanley Racing. But before we get to some of that, I've got to go back to that intro.
Yeah.
Just for a moment.
Wasn't that amazing?
I
never heard that before, did you?
I sent that to you the other night.
Oh, I guess you did hear it before. That's where I got it.
Yeah. And you like, no way.
I played it 19 times.
You said no way.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest.
And it kept getting funnier every time I played it.
Let's be honest. I think Delegate Brewer, she wasn't really anticipating having a challenge for this Republican nomination for the 17th Senate District. Had she not had a challenge, she probably could have just waltzed right into the general election.
Sure.
And probably wouldn't have had to try to reclassify herself as a way right-wing conservative.
A true Republican.
A true
conservative.
But now that she does have a nomination contest opponent, she has been constantly through text, email, social media, everything, been trying to tell everybody how conservative she is.
Well,
and
that recording says something a little different, my man.
So the thing is, it's like, with politicians, don't listen to what I tell you, listen to what she says about herself.
Well, what is the old adage? Believe them the first time they tell you who they are. I think that's probably going to be the way this recording is. But I'm to understand there's a lot more of this stuff out there. And I think, that's what the electorate needs to hear. We've got a lot of things to talk about. Some exciting developments in your primary with the court case that we were talking about last week. We can talk about that. But before we get there is one guy that I know is more conservative than Delegate Brewer. He's our swear bearer. He's Shep Moss. Welcome, Shep.
What's going on? I'm actually sitting on the right of both of y'all today. When I hear that intro,
that's not often.
When I hear that intro, I've got one word comes to my mind. Bull.
Really?
Here we go.
I'll just say
$25 already.
another $25 right off the
swear
bat.
bears were right out of the gate.
I mean, when you get, this is what the problem is. We're going to talk about the court case in just a little while, but you have politicians that are just not true to themselves or true to the constituents. And this is what you come up with. And I'm sure you probably didn't have to dig very hard to find this.
No, that's a lot. One of the first things I learned, and when I started this process of getting into politics, was the opposition research term that I learned. And so there is a lot more where that came from, not only as it relates to her overall feelings or how she legislates or how she thinks, but her comments and the way she's voted on certain things related to the Second Amendment, related to climate change,
Skill games.
skill games, siding with out-of-state special interest, the robotics programs at Franklin.
Yes.
Climate change.
Yeah, climate change. I mean, it's just a lot of things. And so now that we know, and which we'll get to in a moment, now that we know we're going to be lining up for a primary, as our audience that we're trying to reach through my campaign grows from a convention style approach to a primary style approach, a lot more people are going to be learning a lot more about the truth about my opponent in this primary.
And Senator, you've been through this before. Why do politicians feel like they have to portray themselves as something that they're not? If she wants to be a moderate Republican, fine, then be a moderate Republican. But as Hermie says, don't email, don't text, don't do all the mailers is the only, I think the term true conservative or phrase she uses. She true conservative.
She tries to use the fact that she's been in the House of Delegates for 4 years.
Tested conservative.
Yeah, she's only proven, battle-tested conservative is how she markets herself. But the bottom line is, as we've researched and as what she said about herself, she's especially as we were heading towards a convention, she felt like she really had to move way far to the right, because Bill knows better than I do, as I'm learning as I go, the people that typically show up and vote in conventions are the most conservative of the pack.
And they are. And the ones that actually vote in primaries are more conservative as well. I mean, you don't have a lot of moderates participating in the nomination process. And in this case, what you have is, quite frankly, something that I just played on my phone that contradicts what is going on in mailers. And then if that happens, let's just say generic candidate is doing this, says, I'm a rib rock conservative. And then there's a recording that sounds like this. Then they have to explain themselves. So what's the explanation? The explanation is, well, since 2016, I've matured. I've gotten better. But the problem is if that was the only thing you ever said, then it makes sense. But if you're making anti-Second Amendment, anti-pro-gun statements, if you're making statements that sound more like a liberal, then quite frankly, maturing doesn't seem to actually have occurred. What has happened is I'm taking advantage of the electorate, the voter, to make sure that they have short-term memories so I can remold myself, because all I really care about is not really representing them. That generic candidate cares about being elected and getting the power and being called senator.
Just getting elected.
I saw this on someone's Facebook page the other day. It says Emily Brewer's voting record with the caucus 57% of the time, other 43% of the time.
Well, I can tell you that caucus in the House of Delegates, and that's a House of Delegates, a Republican caucus, is a very conservative caucus. So those are issues that I think the voter needs to know about. They need to know about you too, Herm. Yeah. So hopefully you haven't said anything stupid like what we just heard in the opening here after Larry the Cable Guy.
Hey, look, and you know what
I mean? Look, Larry the Cable Guy sounds more brilliant and politically conservative than Emily Brewer did when I played that for you when we started this podcast.
The real thing one of the things that frustrated me to the point of deciding to jump in and run is that many politicians, not you, Senator.
Thank you.
Many politicians.
I'm assuming it's going to be a crappy statement. So
many politicians don't legislate like they campaign. They say certain things to get votes or get donations or to get people on their side. Good, bad, right, or wrong. Emily can make up whatever she wants, say whatever she wants. She can try to make me be whatever she wants me to be. But the The difference is she's actually got a record, and she's got a voting record, and she's got these things like this she said about herself, and those are things that she has to explain and answer for as well.
Well, let's jump right into it. As you know, and those that have listened to the podcast, if you haven't listened to the podcast, we've been talking about, of course, Hermie over the past year. He got involved in politics at the grassroots level, trying to save small businesses, fight for them. It is evolved into him running for Senate, first campaign he's ever run.
What a journey.
And he's got an opponent. And then what we saw is that Shenanigans, if you listen to the podcasts that we had that were entitled Shenanigans, the state party and some people at the top of the pyramid, the political pyramid, started putting their thumb on the scale and trying to rig the nomination process to try to ensure that Hermie Sadler's opponent won. However, and you have to listen to it, so I don't have to repeat all of this. They went so far even as to dissolve the Suffolk Republican Committee, I think unjustly, so that they could take control of the Legislative District Committee for Senate District 17, so they could control the nominating process, change it from a primary to a convention because they thought they had a better shot. That I think they believe that they can't win a primary, and so what we have now was, as we talked last week, Dawn Jones filed a lawsuit against Virginia Department of Elections, alleging that the governor's office, the attorney general's office, made Susan Beals, the head of the SBE, the commissioner, change a writ and order that ordered a primary and withdraw it in favor of a convention. That went to court in the city of Richmond Circuit Court last week. Hermie, you were not the plaintiff. Dawn Jones was the plaintiff, but you filed an amicus curiae brief, a friend of the court brief. We wrote one up demonstrating exactly what the costs were and how the changes affected candidates when you go from a convention to a primary back to a convention, and how much money that costs any campaign, including your opponents. We filed that. Tony Troy, my law partner, a former attorney general of the Commonwealth of Virginia, went in there and argued it with Rick Boyer. Rick filed an excellent brief. I thought they did an excellent job. And the judge said, I'll give you a ruling by Wednesday. This past Wednesday, it's now Friday. 2 days ago, and you'd be amazed, Herm, the attorney general who represented the State Board of Election was none other than one of the attorney generals who represents the governor and ABC in your successful lawsuit regarding skill games.
Yep.
Believe it or not. He said that Dawn Jones was the fact. Yeah, Dawn Jones, and he parroted Rich Anderson, the chairman of the RPV's statement that Dawn Jones was a low-level rogue official of the Republican Party of Virginia.
Party official that went rogue.
Yeah. Right. And then they said, well, she doesn't have standing. And standing, of course, we've talked about before, is whether you have suffered an injury, have a sufficient interest in a case that the outcome would affect your standing and your ability.
Nope.
The court first found that she had standing. That was the important thing, is that she had standing to bring this lawsuit. They tried to dismiss it, saying Dawn Jones couldn't bring this lawsuit against the Commonwealth of Virginia. Their second argument was that the Commonwealth of Virginia was cloaked in sovereign immunity, that somehow the actions by the governor's office, the AG's office, to change the method of nomination in Senate District 17 was protected by sovereign immunity. And for those that don't know, sovereign immunity protects the government from being sued, because otherwise the government would be sued all the time. But the court found that in actions of mandamus, and if this was a ministerial act, then they're not protected by sovereign immunity, because the Code of Virginia mandates that the commissioner file a writ issuing a primary for Senate District 17 if it is properly before her. And so that was the issue before the court. Shep, you wanted to say something?
Well, my question is, were they saying she didn't have standing because they had said they had removed her as the chairperson?
That was one reason. The other reason is she was not really suffering an injury, but the court said she's an interested party. The action that was taken by the State Board of Elections was contrary to an action taken by her in her apparent and legitimate chairmanship duties of the Legislative District Committee of Senate District 17.
Go ahead.
So the court then released a letter of opinion, actually a really well thought out letter of opinion. After finding that it had standing, it went through the protocols of whether Dawn Jones filed a proper form, had the authority to do so, did it lawfully, and therefore compelled the State Board of Election to absolutely make sure that a primary was issued for Senate District 17. I just want to, and when it did the analysis, I want to read part of this to you. It granted mandamus. It ordered the State Board of Elections to order a primary for Senate District 17. And I'm looking through this on my phone. And of course, when I came up here today at this suite, this is the quote that I love the most in this letter of opinion. And bear with me as I read it, squinting all the way at my phone. The court said, "This court finds that the Commonwealth's attempt to present the myriad of inter-party politics obfuscates the actual issue presented to the court, which, if proper notice was given, was such notice honored by the State Board of Elections. The court finds that plaintiff," that's Dawn Jones, "as the duly appointed chair of the 17th Senate District LDC, was entitled by her position to give notice to the SBE that Senate District 17 was to determine its nomination by primary. The court finds that in failing to order a primary for Senate District 17, the State Board of Elections and the commissioner violated their ministerial duty requiring them to order such primary." And so what they did was, Rick Boyer had asked for, on behalf of Dawn Jones, for an injunction. She denied the injunction because you don't need an injunction when mandamus is the equitable powers of the court ordering the government to do something. And so by issuing an order of mandamus requiring the primary to be held in Senate District 17 and that the State Board of Elections hold that primary, this matter came to a conclusion. And it looks like to me that they're not going to appeal it. But we were happy because Tony Troy got to argue a lot of the case with Rick Boyer. Rick Boyer, the attorney, a friend of mine I've known for a while, did a fantastic job. And from what I understand, the government's not going to appeal this. So it looks to me that you are pretty much in a primary position. I understand maybe the Suffolk chair and the district chair are going to now try to remove Dawn Jones as legislative district chair from 17.
Yeah, I've heard that. And that was part of the problem. They tried to establish that they had already removed her, but they did not do it properly.
Well, in this letter opinion, the court says she is the proper chair. Yeah. It is not in dispute that she was the proper chairman at the time that
they didn't follow the law or the party plan. They didn't give her written notice with charges, give her time to respond. And they tried to, and I want to say two things. Number one, I have never really cared as a candidate whether we were going to have a convention or a primary.
Right.
I've never thought that anybody other than the Dawn Joneses of the world should be the people deciding that, including the candidates. We should not be dictating that. The LDC, those type people should. It was never to me, because when I thought it was a convention, we were working towards convention. You knew. I talked to you every night about strategy and things.
Heck, you were knocking doors getting convention.
Yeah, correct. And so when it was switched to a primary, okay, boom, we're going down that road. So my concern, frustration, whatever word you want to use, was not that it was a convention or a primary. It was that all of these people that I did not feel, to use your word, should not have their thumb on the scale trying to manipulate this, were doing just that. So in my view, I'll just break it down in layman's terms for how it was to me. My opponent, Dennis Free, who was the second congressional district chairman, even Attorney General's office, governor's office, the Republican Party of Virginia, Rich Anderson, all these people, they huddled up and they called a play and they ran a play. All this stuff, Bill, did not happen by accident.
Flag for personal foul.
But I'm saying it did not happen by accident. This whole thing was put together and planned in such a way that not only, and what people have to understand, not only did my opponent prefer a convention, she was working towards a convention with, by the way, a new chair in Suffolk named Steve Trent that, by the way, is a public supporter of my opponent and has donated to her campaign multiple times. So they did all this stuff with a plan. They called a play. They ran a play. They did all that. And to your point, fortunately, they got called for a penalty and I had to go back to the drawing board and the right side of things won.
And you know, Hermie, we were talking about this before Bill got here. All of the lawyers, all of the so-called smart people are supposed to be over here in Richmond running the business of the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be the smartest and the brightest of the best. And this is the best they can come up with? What? I mean, really? Bill, you're over here.
Yeah.
What is going on?
Well,
what's really going on?
if you look right down the rostrum, it's not the best and the brightest. It's the most manipulative and the people that have money or know people who have money, and that can be, it's if intelligence was the only measure of whether you got elected to the Senate or the House, Bryce Reeves would never be there. Hey, Bryce Reeves, how are you?
Be a who's
My
who coming
teammate,
in
Bill
here.
Stanley, causing trouble on the podcast. No doubt about it, folks. If you're listening to this podcast today, the Stanley Group is going to win. They're going to win it all today.
How you doing, buddy? So we're sitting here.
Finally, somebody's in this suite with better hair than you, Senator Stanley.
Well, I'd say, look, it's a tie. It's not better.
He
It's
actually
a tie.
has a comms director, too.
He
Bill
does.
doesn't have a
He
comms
does.
director.
She is here, but we're sitting on top.
A message every time she speaks.
We're sitting high atop the Richmond International Raceway. I'm having a fundraiser here. Sadler for Senate, Stanley for Senate. This is one of our fundraisers. So we're hearing people coming in, giving hugs, but we're doing a podcast at the same time. I mean, this is live motion. So you're not getting a hug either, Richard Hull. I mean, and I don't know who invited Bill Carrico. I didn't invite him. He wasn't on the list.
I let him up. I figured he'd be okay.
Oh, that's ridiculous. We're gonna
I'm so glad
we're gonna
he's
have to have somebody at the door guard the door because all the food's gonna be eaten and nobody's gonna have anything good to eat.
As long as we're not doing the weigh-in tonight, because he's supposed to be
we
in
don't
charge
have the
of the
scale.
weigh-in.
You guys are still doing that? I found your weight.
Yeah, well, yeah. You need.
I'm wearing black for a reason.
You need to get on that weight challenge.
Is black supposed to be a slimming color?
I think so. I think it's supposed to be. But you guys are both losing to Bill, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
That poor man suffered during session this last time, watching me eat grilled cheese, bacon grilled cheese sandwiches.
my favorite sandwich I
He
brought.
was salivating the whole time, dripping from his lips.
I ate salad.
Yeah, you ate
Yeah, salad. I did not have one cookie. Thanks, bud. Feeling good. Feeling good.
Stanley, that's what we'll call
I just want to make these guys pay. Okay. So anyway, finish that up though. You got a primary.
Yeah.
Where does Sadler for Senate, Sadler for Virginia go from here?
Well, as I said, for me, we were preparing for a convention. We changed gears, now preparing for a primary. And for us, I'm learning as I go. I've got a team but our target group that we're targeting goes from 5,000 to 20,000.
Yeah.
So all the things we've been doing, from phone calls and mailers to emails to me personally knocking doors and my team, our universe expands out to a point where we have more people we have to go see and talk to. But I'm excited. As I said before, I truly believe that the people like Dawn Jones with the LDCs.
And what a champion she is. I mean, what a fighter.
They were just talked about so condescendingly about, Cal Brown said in something in the trial that people like Dawn Jones are just the messenger. They don't have that authority.
That's ridiculous.
Low level. And those people on the grassroots level type people, the committees, the Republican committees across the Commonwealth, and the chairman and the LDCs, those are the type people, the people that love our state.
Yep.
And the people that give of their time and they volunteer and they get out and they knock doors and they do things because they love the conservative movement in the Commonwealth. And then when the narrative doesn't fit what the powerful people want, sometimes they get
Squashed.
They get squashed, and that's just not the way it's supposed to be.
Well, thank you, Dawn Jones, for standing up and fighting. And let me tell you, Hermie Sadler, you've won more in court than he ever won on this racetrack we're overlooking, right?
Well, I didn't need to be reminded of that.
Okay, I'm just saying, so you need to stick with
That's
me.
not
as
even
your
a compliment.
vehicle.
I'm going to
That's
hit
not
you
even a compliment.
All right, but so I've got Bryce Reeves here. He's my seatmate, senator, great senator. Now he came from the grassroots just like I did. We were unit chairman. Now we're state senators. We never lose. When you come from that area, you never lose what it was like to be a unit chairman and picked on. You never. Does that help? You never. Thank you. That's very nice. Thank you. Suck that, Sadler. Look at that check.
Wow.
So,
$10.
Yeah,
That's nice.
So Bryce, what advice do you have for a first-time candidate? You were a first-time candidate when you ran for state senate. What advice do you have for Hermie Sadler moving forward as he moves now forward into a primary?
So first and foremost, faith in God, right? And I know Hermie has that, right?
Yeah.
And nothing moves without our Heavenly Father making it so. So there's nothing. Hermie already has that. He's doing a great job. The second part of that is, as you were alluding to, Bill, is don't forget where you came from. People want public servants, but they want servant leadership. And Hermie, you exude that. You display that all the time with what you give back through your businesses to the community. And, it's important. And the second thing I would tell you is it's about direct voter contact.
Yeah.
Interaction with the folks that are you're going to be.
My people have told me that nothing replaces the candidate going to the door
or making the phone calls to raise money or anything else, right? And because you're the candidate, everybody else can speak for you and about you, but they want to meet you. And I think, you've come up in an industry that people want to have a personal relationship with every driver, with every team owner. And so you figured that out sort of where the rubber meets the road. It's no different than racing or anything else. And it's about, building those relationships, and you've got those in the community. And I think you're going to excel as you move forward. As you said earlier in the podcast, you were talking about switching gears. I think you've gone from about fourth gear over to fifth gear. And while you have a bigger universe, you're going to be able to reach more people.
That's right.
And, the biggest thing is if you like what Hermie Sadler's doing, if you believe he's the right candidate and he speaks for you, he can't run on no gas.
And the biggest thing is we're having a huge turnover in the General Assembly, but in the state Senate alone, the top 8, top 9 people are not coming back. You and I are going into single digits on our license plates. They give us license plates based on our seniority. I started out as 40. Probably be about 7 or 8 if I'm given the privilege of representing the 7 district.
9 or 10.
Yeah,
I'm right after you, I think.
And I just got a Democrat opponent announced against me today. But we're going to need a Hermie Sadler in the Senate like never before. Somebody has that experience, that business experience, knows how to balance a budget, writes the front of the checks and the back of the checks, knows the differences in ways that our liberal friends from Northern Virginia have never owned a business, never run a business. We need that good common sense. Plus, we need to have somebody who's going to be standing tall for Southside Virginia. And I'm telling you, he's my friend, but we need guys like Hermie Sadler in the Senate. We don't endorse here at the Leaning Right and Turning Left with the Sadler and the Senator podcast, but we talk about his campaign. But we need somebody who's not going to be so consumed with power or wanting to have the name senator in front of their real name, their God-given name. They want to get in there and get something done and protect the people that they represent.
No, that's it. That's exact, Bill. You're 100% right. If we could give away our titles just to do the job without having to do all the other muck, love to do it. And you're right. You and I are small business owners. Hermie's been a business owner. We understand what it's like to put away estimated quarterly taxes and where do you pull money from and what do you cut to get those estimated taxes in there and payroll and
this is mission critical too, because the liberals from Northern Virginia are going to be so radical. The ones that are replacing
the ones that are coming in
for 20, 25 years. It's bad.
It's a whole new world.
Hey,
I'm going to shake a couple hands and get a beer.
I want to ask a question before you go.
Sure.
Because I want both of y'all's advice.
Okay.
Because this has been posed to me. Because obviously, so far in my campaign, I've been fighting battles that I didn't realize I was going to be fighting with people that I didn't realize I was going to be fighting. So after the ruling from the judge came down from Don Jones's case, we realized it was going to be a primary and this, that, and the other. One of my people called me and said, Hermie, you're going to have to pick up the phone and call Rich Anderson and talk to him. And I said, well, I want to talk to Rich Anderson because we need to unite as a party.
Sure.
We need to get everybody on the same page, row in the same way. I said, but I really think Rich Anderson ought to call me rather than me call Rich Anderson. And that goes from my background. I feel like, in other words, go back to the racetrack. If somebody intentionally crashed me on the racetrack on Saturday, he should be the one on Monday morning to make a phone call to me
Hermie,
to start the conversation.
Makes sense, but you're the bigger man.
What does the Bible say about that?
Well,
Yep.
All right. While we're at confession, I'm going to go shake hands. I'll be right back.
He's a good man. He'll listen.
Yeah.
And it makes you the better man, right?
Well, I might.
You got to clear the air and you got to get going because
my point is, I understand the importance of water under the bridge and moving on from wherever he may have been
like
prior to
nothing
this.
you've ever experienced because you're going to look. Churchill said, if you make enemies good, you've done something.
Yeah.
So you've done something now already without even being in elected office. You've already made some waves, and that's okay, right? Because you're doing the right thing for the right reason, and you can never tire of that. But in the same breath, I'll just speak from my own experience.
Yeah.
Jill Vogan and I had a huge separation, huge from what happened to us and happened to me from her camp and what they did and put out and all those things. And, you know, we've made up and, you know, it's just one of those things. And I think, you know, if you reach out to Rich, I can guarantee you he'll take your phone call and you guys just talk through it. I mean, and that stress and that pressure and that tension that you feel, the sooner you do it, it goes away. And look, if it doesn't repair, you've done the right thing.
Right.
You've asked, even if you're not the one.
I bring that up to say is obviously if I'm lucky enough to, and I'm a long way from this, but if I'm lucky enough to be successful in a primary and be the Republican nominee, I want and need the support of the party. And, you know, I don't know exactly what all the steps are to, you know, to get to that point, because right now, I'll be honest with you, they all lined up against me in this process. So they've already told me by what they said and by more importantly, what they've done, that they prefer my opponent. So that's the part that I don't necessarily agree with as much as I think they should be open-minded and welcoming to anybody who is willing to step up and try to serve the Commonwealth and be fair and impartial through the process until the people choose who they want to be the nominee. And in this case, people within the party and the higher ups didn't do that.
Well, here's how I take it, Hermie, and you've been in racing a long time.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same equivalent to sports. Really. I mean, 100%. You just run your race. And I will tell you, at the end of the night, after the primary date's over, the best candidate will win.
Yeah.
And
I go along with that.
Yep. And you just have to run your race.
I can deal with it now. I'm not afraid to lose.
Right.
Now that we know that it will be a primary, I will feel better if I'm not successful, because the way it was headed with all the drama, and I already knew what position everybody had, and we were going to have a convention and people were going to be in charge of the convention that were supporters of my opponent, that, you know, that just wasn't going to leave a good feeling in my stomach.
Open. There's more people engaged.
But I shouldn't have had to go through that. But I understand. And the people always tell me, "Well, Hermie, welcome to politics." That's part of what politics is.
But it doesn't have to be that way.
But I told my wife,
it doesn't have to be
I told my wife 100 times. I said, because I get home, I'm sure you've had plenty of these days. You go work, you knock doors, you do all these things, you get wore out, and I get home at night, 9, 10 o'clock, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing?
Every night.
But then I wake up the next morning, I got to go. I got to go. But I told my wife the other night, I said, even if having to push through all these obstacles, even if it doesn't help me, if it helps the next person like me that decides they want to stand up, step up and try to serve and try to run, I put my family on hold, my businesses on hold, my life on hold. And I've had a lot of things thrown at me, you know, through this process already. So if I help set a precedent or make people realize that, make it a better, more welcoming proposition to people in the future, then I've still done something positive. And so
well, if it was easy, anybody would do it, and anybody could do it, but it takes still resolve, because it's not an easy process.
Yeah.
Winston Churchill even said, I'd rather die of 1,000, I'd rather die once versus politics, die 1,000 deaths for each cut, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that, because each time you have to go through this, it's just grueling on your family. It's grueling on you. I know you're not sleeping much. Yeah. Like, all these things are going through your head all the time.
Not sleeping much. Not sleeping any.
Right. And so, between
looking at these squares, just like
and I get it, and we all get it. But let me just tell you, keep the faith. And here's why. Because once you get in office and you're actually able to get some things done, some major things done, we both know Bill real well. He's done some major things. He's stood up for our kids. He's helped our schools. He saved countless dogs. I mean, you name it. There's a bunch of bills that Bill Stanley has gotten passed. And, I fixed foster care, got our gun rights back, take care of our veterans. And when you have one of your constituents where you solve one of their issues, it's a great feeling.
Just one,
right? And you can't replace that, right? I've always said, if you can change the life of one person, you can change a generation of a family. If you help them through some process or getting, I could tell you a story right now about a young lady and her daughter. And actually right now they're going through rehab down in Virginia Beach, but her daughter got cancer about 3.5 years ago. came up to me in Wegmans, thought I was Congressman Dave Bratt, and was trying to get on Medicaid. Now, she was Latino and on the left side of the aisle, okay, 100%. And she had gone to the Democrats to ask them to help her get through this process because, long story, she was abused. She was now separated. She was still married to this guy. He rang up all this debt. Every time she'd work, she was a nurse. They'd garnish her old paycheck. So she didn't have a way to live, right? And so, but she needed to get Medicaid for her daughter because she didn't have any health insurance. The first available date, we got it done in like 2 days. The first date that they took her to get new glasses, doctor found something. They took her to the hospital. They did a CAT scan, and that same day they found out she had a 6-centimeter brain tumor. Okay. I happened to be in Richmond the following morning. They took her by ambulance to VCU, went up to the, I don't remember what floor, but the children's unit. And she came around the corner and gave me a hug because I went to go visit with them. And she thanked me for saving her kid's life. And I'm like, I didn't save anybody's life. She goes, no, the doctor said if we didn't get this figured out and she didn't have that care, that Medicaid to get the health care she needed, she'd be dead in 6 weeks. Now,
Wow.
she just finished getting another brain surgery to try to take out the scar tissue that was causing her to have all these seizures, but she's cancer free. For 3 years now, she's been cancer free. And so hopefully she goes through this rehab. And that's just one story, Hermie. That's just one story, right? Of impacting people's lives. And you don't even know how you do it sometimes. Yeah. And so for you, knowing your servant heart, this is where you need to be.
Well, that's been the disappointing part for me is I have been blessed in my life in so many ways. And I really and truly want to or feel like I can help people. And that's really and truly why I decided to jump into this race. And so when other people, don't realize that or think you have other motives or would rather have somebody else, those kind of things can be disappointing. But I want to hear about your race. You've got, tell me about your campaign.
We have a primary. It'll be May 6th. And
why primaries? Yours different dates. 6 hours, June 20th.
Yeah, mine's run by the party. So
like a canvas?
It's a canvas.
I got you.
Right. So they call it a firehouse primary canvas. Yeah. Party run, so we keep the left out of it.
Yeah.
And it's the quickest way to get done and get going because
get going to business. Yeah.
As the whip, along with Bill in the Senate, my job is to make sure that we all win the majority. Mm-hmm. Right. That's correct. That's the most. Honestly, that's the most important thing to me is winning the majority back. Because if we're ever going to make the changes that we can make, now's the time.
Got to have a vote.
Well, we're not going to be guaranteed another governor in 2 years. And we have Youngkin who's there, and we have the House. So if we can get the Senate, we can make some major changes.
Yeah.
Both Bill and I have served in the majority, and we've served in the minority. And I can tell you it's a lot of work to be the leader and serve in the majority. But, man, the things you can get done for the people in the Commonwealth. Mm-hmm. And it's that's truly it. And, my opponent's from New York, and he's a lifelong educator. He believes certain things that I totally disagree with. And if to compare and contrast us, is we're 180 degrees difference. And, we're running full speed, just what you're doing every night.
How can people learn more about you or your campaign?
You can go to brycereeves.com. There'll be stuff there. You can donate on there, everything. Every candidate has a website where you can do that. In fact, tonight's the last day for the reporting period of this section. And so,
in fact, somebody just gave Bill a check.
I just saw that.
I'm going to endorse that check. I'll split it with you. I'll give you half. I'll take half.
I guess it is to the company, right?
It is.
So that'd be great. I get $5. You get $5.
I get $5. You get $5. We'll call it a night.
That's it. Yeah. That's it.
Bill will never miss it. But Bryce, on behalf of Bill, now Bill is holding a fundraiser here tonight at the racetrack, and he actually just walked off the set and handed a mic to you, which I appreciate you stepping up and being here. But on behalf of Bill and my family.
How do I get one of these high-speed sweatshirts here? How much do I got to get?
Well, I've been doing this for 12 months, ain't gotten one yet.
So I don't know where to bring a couple of my hats in. So next time I come do the podcast.
That's another thing Bill did. He hijacked the merch from me for the race team very early on last year because Bill had this idea that because we got Bobby Labonte and Ryan Newman driving our cars.
Right.
He says, look, I'm going to take all that merch and I'm gonna reorder stuff, and me and Laura, his wife, we're going to come to the racetrack and set up merch tables, and we're going to sell caps and T-shirts and hats and all that. We're going to make a fortune selling merch. And so Bill,
A fortune.
he
an attorney.
won't be able to wait to hear this when he downloads it. But so he took all the merch from me and Emporia. I had it stored in a warehouse. He took all the merch home, and him and Laura went through and put it all in these buckets and barrels and priced it. And a year later, as we sit here, they have not brought any merch to the racetrack to sell yet.
And mind you,
Not even to the fundraiser. huh?
So they are all in these bins at his house in the mountains. So
and Senator Hermie's used to running a souvenir shop through his NASCAR days. Got a building behind the old company. I think it said souvenir
took all of it
and gifts.
he was going to, we got it. He said, we're going to take it all up there. We're going to sell it. We're going to do this. I said, no problem. And by the way, you can keep all the profits. Take it. And so we've really struggled with merch.
So we just need to drive to Bill's house with my pickup and a trailer and load it up.
Load it up.
Well,
And
Senator,
just write your receipt.
on behalf of all Virginians, thank you for your service.
Oh, please, I'd go back. if I
Thank
wouldn't
you
feel
for
that
being
stuff.
such a great conservative for Virginians and all over the Commonwealth. Best of luck in your race, and all the Virginians that are listening to this in your district, be sure to go out and vote in your primary next month. We got to have you. Virginia, he's calling on you. We got to have him up here to get some stuff done. This guy has an unbelievable story. If you go back and listen to the podcast that we had the full interview with you, it's an unbelievable story, what you went through and how you served not only the Commonwealth, but our great nation. And thank you so much for your service.
Well, I appreciate
You
it.
did a
but
great
like you
job of
guys-
filling in with no prep whatsoever.
I don't need a lot of prep just to have a good time. And, I
Well, he
wouldn't mind
speaks
that.
from the heart. When you speak from the heart, you don't have to prep.
Well, you guys have a good time on this podcast. I've enjoyed my time. I've been wanting to come back, but I've got a few people you guys got to get on the podcast that maybe Bill doesn't know, and some of that to get some more people on it.
Yeah.
Because, I saw the rankings where you guys were and everything else. So it'll be interesting. So, all right, let's talk race cars now.
Yeah,
The cars are all covered
We
now.
got two cars. We got it looks like a good day to fly a kite. Yeah.
A little breezy.
We got Bobby Labonte and Ryan Newman driving our two cars. Big weekend for us, Bryce, because we got the race tonight here at Richmond, and then tomorrow night the Smart Modified Tour, which is the southern version of this, runs at South Boston Speedway.
So you guys
tomorrow
are
night.
moving.
So we're going to
pack it
South
up and
Boston
go back
tomorrow
to
night.
South Boston.
Yeah. Pack
Wow.
up, go to South Boston, and we do it 2 weekends. But I have of all the things I'm most proud of my 25 plus years of racing and doing TV for Fox Sports is the relationships and friendships, much like you guys do
Sure.
with what y'all do in in your everyday life and in the General Assembly. I got some great friends at the racetrack. So for Bill and I to have a 2-car team here at Richmond, a place that I raced so many times in my career, and to have Bobby Labonte and Ryan Newman, who are both great friends of mine that I made over the years, driving cars for us, it's just really, really cool.
Well,
Really cool.
listen. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this track. I've been around this track once in a Tesla, right? Just because they did a Tesla track.
Yeah. Wow.
And these are tight turns, and we were supposed to go over 100. Wink, wink. Right. And the torque in those cars is incredible. But let's talk about the track itself. Let's talk about your cars a little bit, how they're set up, and why you guys think you're in the place where you can, you've raced this track.
Yeah.
So tell a little bit of folks.
In full disclosure, I never raced an open wheel modified here.
Right.
I raced.
Driving's driving though, Hermie.
Well, no, it's not. Driving one of those things, a little different, little ground pounder. I mean, you stuff these things over in the corner and slam on the brakes. You got 800,
Your teeth rattle out.
800
too, right?
horsepower, and these cars only weigh 2,600 pounds.
Yeah.
And you got all this tire on them.
A
The
lot of
full
torque
body stock
and-
cars is tires really narrow, and it's more about kind of finesse. These cars are just, you hustle them. But this is a cool racetrack, 3/4 mile. And Bryce, it's got characteristics of not only a short track, but also intermediate. Because when you come off turn 4 here,
Right.
and come by the start finish line, it's a D-shaped oval, we call it.
Right.
So you got a lot of room to let the car slide a little bit and give it a little bit of head and let it do its thing. And you carry a lot of speed into turn one. You stay out late, way past the start finish line, take a late arc into turn one to carry as much speed. So you apex that corner right in the center of the corner. Now, coming off turn two is tight.
Right.
That is more like a short track.
Right.
So
Martinsville.
Yeah, like a Martinsville.
And I in all disclosure, I got to ride in a car in Martinsville in the pace car.
Yeah.
And I thought they were going to take the mirror off because we were so close to the wall. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not kidding. I kept kind of leaning over to the driver because I was waiting to hit the side of it. So
you can come. I mean, it's coming off turn two. You can run too wide, but no more than too wide. And turn three is a little bit more of a difficult turn because you don't have that
high bank.
You don't have all that room to make a long arc into the corner.
Right.
You have to make a much flatter entry into the corner. So your car really has to rotate better and turn better in the center of 3 and 4, because what happens with these cars, and most people understand this, but if your car will not turn, and in racing terms we call it tight.
Right.
If the front end of your car, when you turn the front two tires, if that car slides the nose, that's bad. But what happens after the car slides the nose is once the front hooks, then the back comes loose.
Correct.
So then you go to a push loose situation, and you cannot have that because this is very much a momentum type racetrack with these cars. So we only come here once a year. This is the NASCAR Whelen Modified Tour. So we've got Richmond tonight. Later in the year, we go to Langley Speedway, Hampton, Virginia. And then we'll do Martinsville with the NASCAR sanctioned version of these cars. And then with the Smart Tour, we've already had Lonesome Pine, but then we have South Boston tomorrow night. We go to Dominion Speedway up Spotsylvania.
Sure.
Later in the year.
That's a good track.
Yeah,
I
great,
hear, right?
Fast.
Steve Britt owns that
Britt's
one.
a great guy.
Wonderful
great guy, good friend. And so Virginia is well represented with those racetracks.
When Steve used to have the track up in Prince William.
Yep.
When I went through the police academy, that's where we drove all of our driving and did S turns and all of it. Tell me a little bit about, for the listeners today who maybe drive some souped up cars and everything else, but really what you experience as a driver. I've always wondered, I watched Ford versus Ferrari and the exhaustion that these drivers went through and how they keep that focus, in a rather monotonous type environment. I think after a while you kind of get droned into like going, and how do you do that?
Well, you can't tell by looking at me now, Bryce, but I used to be in shape.
You still look good to me, Hermie.
I used to be in shape.
You got a suntan too.
Yeah,
I don't know where you're getting that knocking doors.
I remember back in my racing days, of course, I ate better. I usually, from the time I was probably early 20s to early 40s, I weighed 170, 175
You'll get
pounds.
back there knocking doors, I promise you. Knocking up doors, you'll
But
get
another
there.
thing I used to do all the time too was I still have it today. I don't use it that much anymore, but I had a sauna in my house, and I would always put the sauna about 4 nights a week and put it on 110 degrees, 115 degrees, and sit in the sauna for 20, 30, 40 minutes
Try
at a
to
time.
condition your body.
Just to get used to the heat, because these cars, not these modifieds as much, because they're open aired, but the NASCAR Cup Series cars and the Busch Grand National cars that I used to race back in the day, 130, 135 degrees would be nothing to be in those type temperatures for 3, 4, 5 hours.
Right.
And you got 2,000 degree header pipes underneath your seat.
So you're feeling the warmth, are you?
So the heat and the exhaustion was the first thing that would make you lose focus.
All right. So we're there. Tell me about your pre-drive. What do you do the night before? Do you drink plenty of fluids? Eat a little pasta?
That's a big misconception. You cannot hydrate 30 minutes or an hour before the race.
Correct. Yeah.
It's a 4 or 5 day.
I used to tell my teams playing lacrosse in the middle of
4
summer.
or 5 day process.
Right.
You cannot drink a half a gallon of water, the morning before the race and think that you were going to. So back in those days, it was a real thing. It was a process, and we had certain things. Now, I would eat more things based on superstition than I would, not the water, the fluid part of it was one thing, but as far as the eating, it was
my brother is a long distance runner, 50, 100 miles, does those sort of things. He's done everything. Wow. And I asked him, what do you do in the race when you got to go to the bathroom? What do you guys do? I'm curious. I've never heard.
In 25 years of racing, I guess you just sweat it out.
Right.
But I will divulge here on the podcast. You see, Bryce, you can get things out of me that Bill never could.
Right.
In my 25 years of racing,
hey, if I'm winning, that don't matter.
the only time I had to let it go was we had a red flag at Talladega.
Right.
Somebody, maybe even my brother, had got spun out, got up in the fence,
Right.
and flipped 7, 8, 9 times. So we had a red flag with about 8 or 9 laps to go, and we were all on the front stretch. And Talladega in the middle of the summer, you know, so
Right.
I was sweating.
Yeah.
How would you lose water weight
12 pounds.
8, 10, 12 pounds most every time? But we were sitting there under red flag conditions, and you know, when you're not actually racing, that's the only time you really think about it.
Right.
When I'm racing, I guess I could have to go really bad, but I
Adrenaline
just
goes
don't
through,
think about
sure.
it.
It's like being jumping
and you
out of
thought
airplanes.
about it.
And I thought about it, and I had to go. But even still to go, I still had to loosen up my belts, especially
Right.
my lap belts, and you know, but I went.
But it felt a lot better too, right?
But you know, when the race is over, and I've sweated 10 pounds of sweat into a racing suit,
Right.
that's already soaking wet anyway. I mean, what difference does it
I
make
get
at
it.
that
No,
point?
hey, but
Because my
it's
bus
all about
driver would
winning.
always take them and throw them in a trash bag anyway and wrap them up and take them to the cleaners.
Sure.
So,
All right, Hermie, I noticed a little different track than North Wilkesboro. Of course, we had a historic win with Ryan Newman
yeah.
on the wheel at their race back in August. Does this compare at all to North Wilkesboro? I know it's a different shape, but
Well, and there's a little bit of moisture too. How does that
Well,
affect?
the biggest difference with this surface and North Wilkesboro surface is the North Wilkesboro surface is 30 years old, and they purposely, to this point, for the All-Star race coming up at North Wilkesboro, have done nothing to the track surface. They've done a lot of other renovations, but a old, worn-out, coarse racing surface, almost like a cheese grater, rips the rubber off the tires much quicker than a track like this.
Makes sense.
So tire wear, like you go to North Wilkesboro, the key to having good long run speed is to take care of your car and not slide the tires early in a run to keep your rubber on the tires.
because you're right, Ryan Newman came back with maybe 5 laps left.
Yeah.
when he really
He
took
saved.
the lead.
He saved.
And you could tell.
So you could,
they couldn't catch
you
him.
really cannot burn your tires up in the first 5, 6 laps after a restart at a place like North Wilkesboro. Here, although tire fall off is somewhat considerable, you can be aggressive here because you've got a couple tire changes you can change. You can come put tires on if you want to. You can be more aggressive here. But I put North Wilkesboro, that type of surface, in to a place like Rockingham, Darlington, all of the old surfaces that actually you go on the racetrack in North Wilkesboro, because Senator Stanley and I, while we were
With
there,
the golf cart.
well, with that we walked every morning too.
Right.
We get out and walk the surface, and it was actual rocks,
Grit.
grit on that racetrack, and so
is
that,
your
if
car
you slide
uncovered
those
down
tires,
there?
it'll tear the
That's
rubber
not
off.
y'all's.
Of them.
So we're 7th and 10th tonight.
Yeah.
What do you think our chances are?
Well, we got good experienced drivers, but the problem is these guys that run these modifieds do it every weekend. It's really hard to, even with a talented driver like Bobby Labonte and Ryan Newman, it's like playing golf. You can be a really good golfer, but if you play golf once a month and you go to the country club on Wednesday and play with the guy that plays every day,
He's going to get you.
9 times out of 10, he's going to beat your ass.
Well, and I think
So-
they probably bring a little bit of intimidation. Some of these guys are probably thrilled to be driving with those guys, right?
Sure,
Because
yeah, sure.
they're
Well,
celebrities.
The
and-
great thing about Sadler Stanley Racing and having Ryan and Bobby, to your point, it brings another level of media attention, and that attention goes to the other drivers as well.
Sure.
And if somebody else is able to win
I
the
know
race,
Bill wanted me to put an ad on the car, and I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" He goes, "Well, we got well-known race car drivers
Yeah,
now."
yeah.
So
Gives you
So-
instant legitimacy.
yeah, of
Instant
course.
credibility.
so it's but I'm proud that Bill and I are involved, with Sadler Stanley Racing this is grassroots type racing.
Absolutely.
And so having our drivers out there and having our team out there gives.
Be great if we
Yeah.
had some merch.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd
think
even
you
give it away
asked that
free just to
question.
build the brand.
And Bill
then
must have
get
heard
the-
us talking, because he came and grabbed that $10 check and carried it with him.
yeah.
And Senator, this track is where he ran his last race.
Was it
My
real?
last Xfinity Series race.
Xfinity
Yeah.
Series.
Yeah.
So if something happens to one of the drivers, you're third, so you're on deck.
Is that fifth? The window opening, Bryce, is only 12 inches, and my fat ass don't fit in there anymore.
Maybe fifth. We're going to do it.
I'd have to have a porta power to get me in and out.
It'll be a roof hatch for Hermie.
The car would be wrecked before I ever got into the. Actually, Bill talked me into racing at Motor Mile last year in the Smart Tour race. And about halfway through the race, somebody broke a transmission. And you know enough about cars. Transmission grease is a whole different animal than oil on the track.
That's right.
Transmission grease is a problem. So we had a red flag.
Thick as all get out.
We had a red flag, and it took them an hour and a half to clean the track up. And I was the only guy that did not get out of my car during the red flag. Everybody else got out, got cold water, got a drink, walked around, went to the bathroom. My guy's like, "You want to get out?" I said, "Nope, hell no." It's embarrassing enough to do it in the pits when nobody's watching. You think I'm going to try to get out of this car in front of the grandstands and hold my breath, try to get out, and then a few minutes later, try to get back in?
It's a safety issue, right?
I said, yes, more than that. I said, I'm going to just sit right here.
So I'll tell you the story. I got to ride in one of the cars that was street legal.
Yeah.
In Wyoming.
Oh, the ride-along car.
Yeah. And let me tell you something. That was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, just that.
But all was well and good. Did he go in a circle or just go straight?
We did some tight turns, and we did
because all the excitement, when you're going straight, but when you start making sharp turns, that's another level of G-forces and excitement.
Throws you to the outside.
And by the way, put 28 more knuckleheads out there with you.
Yeah, running 4 inches apart.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Pucker factor high.
Zulu. Yeah.
So let's get back to driving the car. Yeah. So as you're driving and you've explained it's pretty rough, and I know what it feels like to drive on a highway in the cars that you're racing. The fatigue level of the drivers with the concentration, I'm just amazed that they can keep it that way. And then, they fly like the Blue Angels out there. Yeah. You guys fly around and it's those just a minor tweaks or minor catches.
Well, they better be focused.
And the G-force for these cars is greater than what you'll see the rest of the weekend here at Richmond in the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series, because these cars are lower to the ground. They got big wide tires on them, much faster through the corners. They're lighter, lower to the ground. The Cup cars and Xfinity cars are more top heavy. You take the turns slower, and so the G-forces you'll have with these cars is much greater than the other cars.
So I see the guys going out on the track now. Are they just vacuuming? Are they vacuuming the track?
Actually, no. And I can't really see through the window. Typically, they put those on the track when they've had a little bit of moisture on the track.
So they're picking up the moisture.
Those things drive the track.
Well, Hermie, I'm pleased to have somebody sit down that used to be my seatmate as well. Ladies and gentlemen, my good friend on the podcast today is former Senator, I still call him Senator, Bill Carrico. He was a retired state policeman. I think Bill and I were the only two police officers left when you left, and now I'm it. But you know
what I learned from Bill Carrico when he was on our podcast?
Not to mess with him.
8, you're safe. 9, you're mine.
That's right. Yeah, I have to keep.
Look, it's leaning right and turning left with Sadler and Center. Doesn't mean it's the Bryce Reeves podcast. Just because I'm out there shaking hands.
He's in.
Really, I'm out.
He's in.
You're out. You got two senators. You got Billy Carrico. You got Bryce Reeves.
Hey,
my seatmates both are replacing me.
Yeah.
He's even holding on to the mic.
You go back over there and hobnob.
I'm hobnob.
Sadler Stanley racing gear can be found in Bill Stanley's garage. So if you'd like to get merch of Sadler Stanley Racing, please go to BryceReeves.com. We'll make sure you get the merch. I'll go to his house and I'll pull it out.
So when I was in the General Assembly, we had so many bills killed that Bill Stanley, Bill Carrico, and Bill DeStep were the only three the governor couldn't kill that year. And
right, that was
we were the only. That's right. We were the only survivors.
No, sit, Bryce. I got more schmoozing to do, so I'm really happy about this. Just don't go over 2 hours, okay? I know you can do this. Now you're all hot.
Hey, I've been asking about racing, learning about the cars. Some people can't buy a race team, right? So we can only observe, and getting the chance to come and hear one of the finest racers we've ever had in NASCAR speak about tracks and what it takes. And
coming.
Race better if you had some team attire.
Well, all we have.
I'm sure I could go to another suite and they'd probably help me out.
Sure
you know?
they would. Sure they would.
See, I was at the podcast when the weight loss challenge came along,
Yeah,
and
we're not weighing in tonight.
listen, I pushed that along. It looks like I might be a winner.
Yeah,
here.
I need to join that team right now. I can tell you. That's one thing, Hermie. When you get into the Senate, you spend a lot of hours in a stressful situation and you're not moving much. Your Senate seat will be like a NASCAR seat, and you're gonna be like waiting and waiting and waiting. Then you go back, you'll eat. Isn't that right, Bill? I
The
mean,
hot seat is where you eat.
Well, I have a
you
bad
gain the freshman
habit
15.
of when I'm stressed, I eat. So 1 year in the Senate, I look just like Shep Moss.
Hey, look, Senator, I don't know if you know this or not, but we did this round 2.
Round 2, right?
We did a round 2, and my charity
Is
the
my
state police,
foundation.
and I think I got it.
I think you do
I'm
too.
down
You
about 11, 12 pounds.
That's
I think
awesome.
I got it.
I-
I
I'm-
know I'm not finished.
11, 12 pounds.
I'm not
Shep
finished.
walked into Bill's office 2 weeks ago and says, I haven't been eating any fast food. I haven't done this. And he's eating a McDonald's chicken sandwich.
Well, that's because he doesn't provide any food.
Yeah, he likes to starve you. He's a lettuce eater.
yeah,
Yeah, he
Stanley
said,
will
look, y'all come
starve
over
to
here to
win.
my apartment. We're going to record the podcast. I'm going to make y'all some soup. I'm like, come on, man. Can't make it on soup.
Yeah,
Hey, he
I
likes winning more than he likes losing.
Yeah.
so.
I haven't eaten Stanley's cooking. I've avoided that for some time.
He's cooking.
So,
He's trying to cook healthy now
well,
because he wants to make a point on the podcast.
so how's the
Bill,
races going?
Yeah, I mean, we've only had 2 so far this year. Mother Nature's been winning more races than we have. But we raced at Florence, South Carolina. We had a race down at Caraway. This is our team's first NASCAR Whelen Modified Tour race. So we'll run about 4 NASCAR Whelen races this year. We got tonight at Richmond. We'll also do Martinsville. We'll do Langley later this year, and then at North Wilkesboro. And then we're running the full Smart Modified Tour schedule, including tomorrow night at South Boston. So it's a big weekend of racing for us. We qualified both cars pretty good tonight. And as I said earlier, we got Ryan Newman and Bobby Labonte behind the wheel. So we are hoping for a good, safe night and hopefully come home with a checkered flag. Then I'll lose a little bit of weight because I'll be running down to Victory Lane.
Well, how about the other race, the race for the nomination? How's that
Wow.
going?
Have you heard anything about what's going on with all that?
I have not.
We,
I try to keep up a little bit as
Yeah.
it goes along.
Well, we
so-
just this past week through a lawsuit
It's going to be a lifetime movie.
for filed by Don Jones, the chairman of the Legislative District Committee. The judge just ruled our nomination contest moved it from a convention to a primary based on that's what it was originally.
right.
And then it was changed, and then the judge made them change it back. So we just found out this week that we'll have a primary on June 20th. So we've shifted gears as a campaign and gone from preparing for a convention to preparing for a primary. So my team is hard at work changing gears and expanding the universe of people that we're talking to. But Bill, I have really tried to enjoy the process.
Right.
I've met a lot of really nice people along the way. Not only people involved in politics, but potential constituents, and people that I hope to be able to help make their lives better and all that. So I've really worked hard, but I've really tried to do it in a way that I'm trying to enjoy the process.
That's the only way you can do it. If you don't enjoy it, it won't be beneficial
Yeah.
to you or your constituents because you.
So instead of trying to get up in the morning and be, oh man, I got to go knock doors today, I get up with the attitude of, hey, I get to go knock doors and I'm going to meet some new people today.
right.
And so that's how I'm approaching things. And so far, I've really enjoyed that part of it. And I think there's an appetite, especially in our part of Virginia, to send somebody like me, maybe with not as much political experience, but with a real passion for our area of Southside Virginia.
And common sense.
Well, look, I don't know. You know, I get what you're saying, but there are a lot of smart people in the General Assembly, but you've really, to me, our part of Virginia has been overlooked in so many ways by the people that have been representing us, and I hope to be somebody that can spend more time advocating for the things and bringing attention to the needs that we have in our part of Virginia. And that's what I'm focusing on.
Well, I think in politics, you're going to find out what Webster's definition of a representative should be is one that's most like the people.
Yeah.
So if you're going to any branch, whether it be the state government, local government, or federal, you want someone who's most like the people. And you learn through the process of knocking on doors, meeting them at conventions, whatever, what these people's desires and what they are. They may be different from what you deal with, but you learn as you go through that process. And you become most like the people because of your ability to put yourself out there and learn their issues.
One of the things that compelled me to run, Bill, that was really frustrating to me is not all, because the vast majority of people that I know that are serving in the General Assembly are hardworking, good-hearted, well-intentioned people.
Sure.
But there are some that don't always legislate like they campaign.
Right.
And we just can't afford that in our part of Virginia.
Right.
There's so much strength and power in Northern Virginia, as you well know, even to the far east, Hampton Roads. And our little part of Virginia just sometimes gets overlooked, don't get the attention. We don't advocate or maybe fight hard enough for our area. And, there's nothing more rewarding. And I take this as a compliment, Bill. You've done this before, so you know. So, like, we've got people on my team that volunteers and even people we pay to knock doors. When I'm not with them, they have right at a 10% connect rate. And by that, I mean having a verbal interaction with somebody at the door and talk to them. When I go, it's 48%.
Right.
Because
they want to see the candidate.
They want to see
and plus,
you.
when even if they're reluctantly walking to the door, when somebody says, when I say, hey, I'm Hermie Sadler running for Senator, and they recognize my name, if nothing else. And that gives me something to talk to them about outside. And then more times than not, I get invited inside. And so that's a good thing too. But I have really enjoyed the long and very sometimes emotional conversations that I've had with people that are looking for somebody to stand up and fight for them. And that's been the most rewarding part of what I've done so far is meeting these people, talking to them, getting to know them, and knowing that if I'm fortunate enough for the people to select me to go to Richmond to represent them, I get to really and truly stand up for and help the people that otherwise don't have a voice.
In today's society, you see too many campaigns that just want to win elections based on the amount of money they raise and the amount of brochures they send. People want to know real people, and you need to know real people to know what the real problems are. And so when you go out and you meet these individuals and you hear these stories, that gives you a fire in your belly to fight for them when you get there.
Yeah.
And that's the big difference. And I think if you watch how legislators react when you're in the General Assembly, you can tell those that don't get outside of the box of just winning by mailer or TV ads. Those that go out and fight and meet their constituents, whether it's your side of the aisle or not, they are the ones with the fire and ability to come out and to take that fight to it.
And I've even, on the times when I've been out door knocking, we have these like walk books, these apps and stuff. I go up to somebody's house, even if they've got a sign of my opponent in the yard, I still go knock on the door.
Sure.
And I go talk to them, and I say, hey, I respect and understand that you support my opponent. But if I'm lucky enough to win this nomination, I'm going to need you to support me to win the general election. And if I win, I'm going to support and represent the people that didn't support me in the primary as much as I do the ones that started on me from day one. So I hope to not only represent some people, but I hope through the course of this process, if I'm able to advance past the primary, I'm gonna work hard to try to unite our people as well, because we're all going to need it as conservatives in November. We have to have a big November, and for us to do that, we all have to at some point in time unite and help each other. And I hope we get to that point.
Well, I think in this country today, we've got to find a way to where politics are not made personal.
Right.
And that's what you're talking about is, look, okay, you have your favorite. I get that. I understand that. But I'm running and I could win this. And if I win, I want your support. I want to know what your problems are. I'm not going to turn a blind eye to you because you supported someone else. Because in the future, I want you to support me.
Yeah.
And I think if people realize that, if our whole country would get to this point, I think we would have a better chance when we get to the respective bodies to work things out. The problem is now we've divided it and said, no, I'm not working with you. I'm not working with you. And we get nothing done.
That's right.
And Senator, a lot of times that support may be based on where that constituent lives and where in relation to that candidate. They may be supporting Hermie because they live in Emporia. They may be supporting your opponent because they live in Isle of Wight and may not know you. Yeah. So that's you've got to knock on those doors.
Well, in our area too, and one thing we should be able to all to agree on is, as a business owner and as a father and trying to make people's lives better, I've had to pick up the phone the last 15 years and try to call Senator Lucas, and nice person, but her number one priority has not been Southside Virginia.
It's been Portsmouth.
It's been Portsmouth because that's been her bread and butter. That's what she's had to focus on.
Look at national politics.
Yeah.
The focus is on New York, California. It's where the votes are.
Right.
They leave when you look at a map, every place in the United States is red except for these population points. That's not the way our founders intended for that to be. They intended for everyone to have a voice in this.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in politics today, they go to the population point, which I know you got to have, but you can't leave everyone out.
Yeah.
And that's what you're facing.
Yeah.
In your district, you've got
there, like I said before, I think if one thing that's been consistent with the messaging that I've gotten back from the people in the new 17th, is that we've got an opportunity to put a conservative in as somebody that's going to pay attention to and advocate for our area. And I think at the appropriate time, everybody will unite to try to make that happen, because it's been too long.
Well, when you get there, don't be afraid to stand up and challenge it.
Yeah.
You guys, as Senator Stanley can tell you, there's few of us. You got to stand up and fight.
That's
You may be few.
A different set of slings and arrows every day, it seems like, but that's all I've been doing is just wake up the next day and keep fighting. That's all we can do.
You may be few, but you got to be furious.
Well, look, let's switch gears for a minute. As you know, the General Assembly just wrapped up a couple of weeks ago.
Go and talk. This is
any
nice.
bills passed to help our law enforcement?
Yeah, we had a couple of bills. One that most people don't realize that was very important to the state police. In 2020, the bill passed that said you couldn't carry a gun when you were off duty
we talked about that.
On the state property. That changed, and the General Assembly, both House and Senate, said that off-duty officers can carry their gun on state property if you're retired and got a federal firearms permit. That passed. There were several things that passed about the cancer presumption bill that covered our guys that are going in to clean up meth labs, fentanyl labs, that weren't covered under workers' comp if they were to get sick with cancer. So that passed. And now we're just kind of waiting to see how the budget plays out.
Because we're in our budget process in South Hill.
Right.
We just started this week. We had a work session Wednesday afternoon, and one of the departments we were talking about was our police department. And, you know, I'm just a huge supporter of our police department as well as state police. And we were talking about compensation competitiveness.
Right.
And I want to make sure, at least in South Hill, that not only are we competitive, but we are the leader in our region, because recruitment and retention, as you know, right now is probably at its hardest and maybe lowest. I remember in the podcast, I think you said you just graduated one of the smallest classes.
Right. 33,
this year.
I think it was.
33 troopers. Yeah. So anything, well, you mentioned budget. Do you know if compensation, how that may line up?
So in the budget, there were several initiatives to do increases in the salaries. $5.99 money, which comes back to localities.
Yes.
For those smaller departments. One of the things that we're seeing right now, and you're gonna notice this all through the state, small and large, is living expenses. If you've not watched the housing market, and the cost to build or buy a home has skyrocketed. Well, when you have a law enforcement officer that's making $28,000, $30,000 a year trying to support a family, but his rent is going to be $1,800, $1,900 a month.
Can't sustain it.
He can't sustain it.
Or a trooper that gets relocated.
Right. And
that has to buy a home in a new area or a new region, I guess you would call it.
Right.
It's astronomical right now.
It's amazing to watch how this market has gone. And you've got to wonder where it's going to plateau. But you've got to be able to keep a salary equivalence to where they can afford to live. If they can't afford to live, they're not going to take this job.
Right.
They're going to go somewhere else.
Or a different profession.
Absolutely. That's what most of them are doing. We're looking at other alternatives, maybe working with developers or real estate companies to kind of give some preferential treatment to people that are being transferred into areas, so that they can know that there's some kind of housing out there that they can go to, and in communities that are safe, because there's no law enforcement officer want to go into a community where he's always working off a duty. If it's you can't send him in a crime riddled neighborhood, because he would never get any rest. It would always be working. So there's things that are creating this void in law enforcement. Now we go back to the media. Unfortunately, the media hasn't slowed down on, reporting things that happen with law enforcement, and just day after day after day, just staying on that issue. Bad things happen in every profession. So if you
now it's just magnified.
They magnify it when it's law enforcement.
Well, look, I know Hermie donated to the foundation. I'm going to win this weight loss challenge. I'm going to get you some more money.
That's great news.
But how can our listeners donate to your organization and help our great men and women across the Commonwealth of State Police Officers?
So our nonprofit is on our website, vspa.org. You can go to there. We do we send out a letter each spring and fall asking for donations to help our foundation and to help our operational cost. And they can go to vspa.org. We have as much as you want to donate, or we can do $11 a month, and it helps us to keep a pot of money that when some of these law enforcement, we don't just exclusively do it for state police.
That was going to be my question.
We do it for everybody. If we see a need and we see a situation when a law enforcement officer's involved in, where we had one that's house burnt down, we stepped in right then and started raising money and sent it. I think we sent him $11,000.
Wow.
And we had one that had leukemia that was having to stay in Winston-Salem. We stepped in, we did a golf tournament, we raised $13,000. All these things go directly to those individuals. We don't get anything operational from that. We do it to help them.
That's awesome.
We've done it for our dispatchers, sheriff's deputies, town police officers. And, you know, we want to evaluate that need because, like everything else, you know, you got people who will take advantage of situations. So we just ask for the information on what this effect is on the family in order for us to determine how we, you know, give that donation.
Did you see anything in the budget so far about COLA? Are you getting a feel for percentage, maybe 7-8%?
Yeah, there's a COLA increase for VRS and for hazardous duty pay. So hazardous duty pay right now is like $1,222. That will increase to $1,400. And hazard duty pay is the supplement between the age of 55, if you retire with 25 years, 55 years of service,
right,
till you get to that Social Security age. And that only covers insurance, and it usually don't cover the whole amount if you have a young family.
Sure.
So that will help a lot. Retirees will benefit some from the COLA raise through VRS. Then you got on the federal level. So
VRS just went from 16 to almost a little over 21%, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So that's going to be huge for the law enforcement. Well, all the workers.
All over, yeah.
But it's also going to create some budget problems for localities too.
It will. And, you know, that's the whole thing with VRS. You got to keep VRS where it's made whole, where the actuaries are paying.
Right.
Because you have so many people that are in that system. You got teachers, correctional, local, state, law enforcement, all, VDOT, everybody that's in that system. So it's a huge system, but the investments have been really good. And over the years, we've been good stewards. The only thing is when you get to the General Assembly, you have to refrain from taking money from VRS to balance a budget. That happens. It's
not a slush fund.
It's not a slush fund. And that happens occasionally.
Well, that would be like a locality using their water and sewer fund to balance the general fund. Ask me, I know. It's been happening in South Hill for 20 years. We're stopping it this year.
The temptation to take it is always there because there's no restriction when you come to budgeting.
And it's really two separate entities. You need to run it as two separate businesses.
You really do.
Well, look, we're getting ready for race time here.
Yep.
We want to get around and speak to some of the guests in here. Bill, it's always good to see you. Thank you for spending a few minutes with us here on the podcast. As always, Shep, we appreciate our listeners, appreciate our supporters, and what a fun night. We got
it's a who's who here,
full of people. But this is Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator.
NMLS number 65084, equal housing lender. Woo!
As an adult, don't we all miss spring break? Nothing like taking a week off from all your responsibilities. Well, here's the next best thing for adults, a spring break from house payments. SaveWithConrad.com can help you get rid of all your credit card debt just like that. We're routinely helping our listeners save $5, $6, $7, even $800 a month. And you don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket to do this, but check this out. No house payments for 2 months at SaveWithConrad.com.